Hey guys, and welcome! In Battlefield 2042 there is a variety of barrel attachments available, like muzzle brakes, compensators, suppressors and so on, and they all have different effects and benefits to your weapon and gunplay. In today's video I will go into depth on all of them, explain how they work and what their advantages and disadvantages are, so you can better judge which one is perfect for you and your personal playstyle. The game gives you access to 2 muzzle brakes, 2 compensators, 2 different kinds of barrels, 2 light suppressors, 2 heavy suppressors, and a handful of special attachments that are only available for 1 or 2 specific weapons and have slightly different stats. In general, barrel attachments either affect your recoil, accuracy, projectile velocity, rate of fire, or minimap visibility, but there are also some impacts that are not mentioned in the stats or in the description. As usual, I tested as many of these attributes as I could to give you the best possible insight. But now let's start with the first pair of attachments, and that's the 2 muzzle brakes, Champion and Arcom Tactical. Both affect the vertical and horizontal recoil of your weapon in different ways, but they don't have any impact on firepower, range or accuracy. Vertical recoil is the upwards movement of your weapon when shooting and is usually a lot stronger than horizontal recoil, but it's also easier to control simply by moving your mouse or aim stick into the opposite direction. And horizontal recoil is the left-right movement of your weapon, which is usually a lot less strong, but it's also much harder, if not impossible, to control. And understanding this is very important to be able to choose the right attachment for your weapon, because the Champion muzzle brake will have a positive effect on your vertical recoil, but has a negative effect on the horizontal, while for the Arcom Tactical it's the other way around. So when compared to the factory barrel, you can see that the Champion muzzle brake has indeed a lower vertical recoil, but also a higher horizontal, while for the Arcom the vertical recoil is definitely higher, but the horizontal seems to be the same. And I'm not sure if that's just a coincidence or if I would have to be a lot further away to see a difference, but even after measuring the lines, there's no real difference in horizontal recoil for the Arcom compared to the factory barrel. For the Champion, however, there is a huge difference, and to give you some rough numbers, the difference in vertical recoil for the Champion is about 10% less, while the horizontal recoil is about 50% more, and for the Arcom, the vertical recoil is about 3% more compared to the factory, while for the horizontal it's basically the same. I've tried this several times with the M5A3 on a distance of 15 meters, but it always looked pretty similar. So for weapons with a high vertical recoil, it seems like the Champion is still a good choice since it has the biggest impact on vertical recoil, but for the horizontal recoil reduction, the factory barrel might be better, at least when looking at the muzzle brakes. Because the next 2 attachments have an effect on the recoil as well, and that's the Warhawk and the Tactical Compensator. According to their stats, they either give you a benefit in recoil control or in weapon accuracy, and here it's important to know that the recoil stat always affects both kinds of recoil, so it's not split up into horizontal or vertical here. Instead, both recoil types are adjusted in a positive or a negative way. For the Tactical Compensator, this means that recoil is getting stronger in general, while the weapon's overall accuracy is increased. And for the Warhawk, it's the other way around, and the accuracy gets lowered, but the general recoil control is increased. Just like the muzzle brakes, both attachments do not have any effect on your weapon's firepower or range. Compared to the factory barrel again, the Tactical Compensator has about 15% more vertical recoil, but no measurable horizontal recoil increase, and the Warhawk has a 10% reduction of vertical recoil and a 25% reduction of horizontal recoil. The accuracy is unfortunately a stat I can't really test or measure, so it's hard to say what kind of effect it has, but just from playing I've always had the feeling that more of my bullets hit the target with the Tactical Compensator, but with the Warhawk the weapon was significantly easier to control. So when comparing the compensators to the muzzle brakes, it looks like the Warhawk is the best attachment you can use if you're looking for maximum recoil control, while surprisingly the factory barrel seems to give you the most balanced experience. Still, it depends on the weapon and its behavior what kind of attachment you should use, so it's always the best way to try them out and see what works for you. And that's also the same for the next two, even though they have a completely different effect on your weapon, and that's the shortened and extended barrel. Both attachments change the rate of fire and projectile velocity, but not the actual firepower or damage drop-off on range. Projectile velocity defines the time a bullet needs to travel from your weapon to the enemy, and this is especially interesting when shooting at moving targets. Cause the higher the velocity, the faster your bullet will travel and the less you will have to lead your aim. If the value is low, the bullet travels slower and you need to lead your aim a lot more to successfully hit a target. So what the two barrels do is that the shortened one increases your weapon's fire rate by about 15% but lowers the projectile velocity, while the extended one lowers the rate of fire by about 15% but increases the projectile velocity. The damage output, like I said before, is still the same, which means with the shortened barrel you will deal the same amount of damage at, let's say, 100 meters that you deal with the factory and the extended barrel. The only difference is that the weapon fires faster and your bullets are slower, and for the extended it's the other way around. And when looking at the recoil patterns, it also looks like the shortened barrel reduces the vertical recoil a little bit, and for the extended barrel the horizontal recoil seems to be lower, which is surely affected by the change in fire rate. So when you prefer to be in the thick of the battle where most gunfights happen on close range and in hipfire, the shortened barrel should be your go-to attachment, while for long ranges and more precise shots, the extended barrel might make your life a lot easier. If you prefer a more stealthy playstyle, on the other hand, one of the many available suppressors might be a better choice for you. But careful, cause there are also some downsides that are not mentioned in the description or the stats of these attachments and that you should definitely know about. So let's start with the two light suppressors, Wrapped and 6KU. Both of them suppress the sound of your weapon, hide you from the minimap for all enemies on longer distance, and in addition they also lower your effective range. When looking at the stats, it shows a firepower reduction for the 6KU and a range reduction for the Wrapped. And that's so far the official description, but this is not completely right. The first point that is different from the actual values is the minimap stealth, because here it says more than 40 meters in the description, but it's actually 20 meters, so all enemies that are within 20 meters around you will still see you as a red dot on the minimap when you are shooting, and all enemies that are more than 20 meters away will not see you anymore. And the second point, and that's actually the more interesting one, is the reduction in firepower and range, because I always thought that firepower would mean a general loss in damage, while range means a bigger damage drop off on distance, but instead the range stands for your projectile velocity. So the 6KU has indeed an 8% damage reduction across all ranges, but the Wrapped does not lose any damage and instead only the projectile velocity is lower, which means you need to lead your aim a little more when firing at moving targets, but this is pretty easy to compensate, while a loss in damage is not. So when you want to use a light suppressor, you should definitely go with the Wrapped, because this attachment has the great advantage of giving you the same damage output the factory barrel does, and also comes with all the other benefits of the light suppressors. The only advantage the 6KU seems to have is a slight reduction in vertical recoil, but it looks like both light suppressors have a small benefit here. In addition to the Wrapped and 6KU, there are also some suppressors that are only available for 1 or 2 single weapons, but these all have similar stats. So the GAR45 of the G57 and PF51, the Spook Y for the MP28 and the NVK SHH for the P125 all work in a similar way as the 6KU. They suppress the weapon's sound, give you minimap stealth on a range of 20 meters or more, and also reduce the weapon's firepower, but here it's even 10%. So only the Wrapped makes a difference at the moment. And then there are also the two heavy suppressors, Type 4 and PB Heavy, but these are only available for a handful of weapons like the MP9, K30, AC42 or MCS 880. Both of them give you full minimap stealth on all ranges, so no matter how close or far away the enemy is, they won't see you as red dot on their minimaps when you're shooting, but they also reduce your firepower and range. According to the description, they will also give you hit indicator stealth in combination with subsonics, but this is not the case anymore. Before the hit indicators were changed to the current ones a few months ago, we only had this one single indicator with a directional arrow, and back then the stealth indicator was a bit smaller and had no arrow, which made it a little harder to pin down the exact direction you've been shot from. But now we have all these single indicators and they always look the same, no matter what attachment or ammo type you use, and also when you use the combination of heavy suppressor and subsonics. So it's only a point in the description that sounds good, but it's not there in reality. In addition, the damage output and the projectile velocity also get reduced, similar to the light suppressors, but here each suppressor gets affected by both stats, only in different ways. And just like I did for the light ones, I also tested the damage reduction for the heavy, and here the PB heavy deals about 15% less damage, while the Type 4 only deals about 10% less. So there is a damage reduction for both of them, but it's again not the same. Which means if you want to use a heavy suppressor on one of your weapons for maximum stealth, you should go with the Type 4. In addition, there's also a special heavy suppressor available that you can only find on one single weapon, and that's the NVK box for the S22 shotgun. It looks a little bit different than the other ones, but for the stats it's the same as the Type 4. It gives you full minimap stealth, doesn't have hit indicator stealth even though it's in the description, and it also reduces the damage output of the weapon by 10%. Besides this, there are two more weapons with very specific suppressors that also have different stats and benefits, and this is the RM68 with the CCN suppressor brake and the shortened barrel suppressor, and the BSV-M with the shortened and extended suppressor. But the video is pretty long already, so I just go through them real quick. The CCN is the default barrel attachment for the RM68 and basically works like a light suppressor, which means it gives you minimap stealth at more than 20 meters and lowers your effective range, but it also gives you better vertical recoil control, but without having a negative effect on the horizontal recoil. So a bit like a mix of light suppressor and champion muzzle brake. The shortened barrel suppressor, on the other hand, is a mix of light suppressor, champion muzzle brake and shortened barrel, and has all the benefits of the CCN, but also increases your rate of fire. And for the BSV-M, the shortened and extended suppressor works like a light suppressor as well and gives you minimap stealth at long range, but in addition they also affect your rate of fire and projectile velocity in the same way the shortened and extended barrel do. The stats here look again a bit strange and seem to indicate a loss of firepower for the extended suppressor as well, but I tested it and there's no change in firepower or damage output at all between these attachments. And for the recoil, the extended suppressor even has a significant reduction, while the shortened is pretty close to the factory suppressor. So don't get fooled by these stats. And the last question for this video is surely, what is the best barrel attachment now? Well, it always depends on your personal playstyle, but also on the weapon and its default characteristics, so you should definitely try different attachments and see what works best for you. But as a start, I would recommend the Warhawk Compensator if you're looking for maximum recoil control, the extended barrel if you want maximum range and damage output, and the Type 4 Heavy when you need maximum stealth. If you can live with a limited minimap stealth, however, I would recommend to use the wrapped suppressor. And that's it for today. I hope this video gave you some good insight on the available barrel attachments of 2042 and you have a better understanding of what they all actually do now. And if that's the case, be sure to drop a like or a comment below and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Until then, thanks for watching and thanks to my members for the additional support. I'm the Catwoman and you are awesome.